Next, Mr. Chameleon and the Stolen Melody murder case. Tonight, we again present the famous Mr. Chameleon of Central Police Headquarters in his famous cases of crime and murder, brought to you by the makers of genuine Bayer Aspirin. Mr. Chameleon, as you know, is the famous and dreaded detective who frequently uses a disguise to track down a killer, a disguise which at all times is recognized by the audience. Tonight, we give you Mr. Chameleon in the Stolen Melody murder case. That world of music and musicians, which is known as Tin Pan Alley, is a world full of hopes and ambitions and sometimes tragedy. But to Jimmy Phillips, there is only hope and joy in his world right now, and we find him in his tiny, shabby studio on a court, picking out a lilting tune on the piano, while his adored Dela Brown sits listening.
Jimmy, it's beautiful. It's bound to be a terrific bit. James Phillips, the famous composer. How will it feel, darling?
Wonderful. How will it feel to be Mrs. James Phillips?
Wonderful. Oh, Jimmy, it's been a long, hard pull, but we've made it.
Thanks to you, Della. It was you who wrote down the notes while I worked out the melody on the piano. Now, if I can just get a name band to feature it, a big name band.
Like Danny Payton's? He's opening tonight, Jimmy, at the Folie de Paris. I read a notice of it. Here it is. Danny Payton, the band leader and darling of society, is expected to have a terrific opening tonight. He will feature a new composition of his own, which is expected to make the hit parade.
And it won't be long before he's featuring a new composition by James Phillips, which is expected to... What's that, Della?
What? Oh, that's Danny Payton playing the saxophone. You know his place is right across the court.
Yeah.
And what a place. When I look at this dingy little hole and think how you've starved...
Della, listen. Listen, he's playing my song. He's playing Moon Dreams.
But he can't be.
He is. Listen, Della. He stole it. Danny Payton stole my new song.
Jimmy.
He must have heard me picking it out on the piano, going over it and over it. That's my song, and he stole it.
Jimmy, where are you going?
I'm going over to see Danny Payton. He's not going to use my melody and pass it off as his own.
Darling, no, you'll get into trouble. You know his reputation, the gangsters he hangs out with. He may be the darling of society, but he has dreadful friends.
I don't care, Della. I'm not afraid. He can't do this to me.
Then get a lawyer, Jimmy. Get a lawyer to handle it.
No, I'm going over to see that dirty thief myself. I'm going after him right now, and I'll do anything to stop him from stealing my song. Anything.
Jimmy, come back here. Come back.
And a few hours later, at Central Police Headquarters, we find the Commissioner of Police sitting at the telephone. And as Mr. Chameleon, the great detective, enters the office, the Commissioner looks up and then says into the telephone,
"Oh, he's here now, Detective Foley. I'll send him right up. You've heard of Danny Payton, haven't you, Chameleon?
The famous band leader? I've danced to his music on many an occasion, Commissioner. The darling of society.
And the secret friend of underworld characters. Well, Danny Payton will never lead an orchestra again, Chameleon. He was beaten to death in his place at the Whitmore Studios.
Beaten to death? When?
Apparently early this evening. He managed to crawl to the telephone and get the receiver off the hook before he died of his injuries.
Well, it sounds simple enough. The killer shouldn't be hard to find. Or should he?
That's the question. And it's up to you to find the answer. So get up there to Danny Payton's studio, Chameleon. Take Detective Arnold with you.
And shortly after, in band leader Danny Payton's luxurious studio, Mr. Chameleon is examining the sprawling body by the telephone. He is saying to Detective Dave Arnold,
So he managed to crawl to the telephone before he died. Who was the first one to find him, Dave?
Al Mack is trumpet player, Mr. Chameleon.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Mack?
Yeah, that's me. What do you want? You're too smart a dick to think just because I found Danny's body, I bumped him. I'm not getting myself mixed up with murder. I'm just a trumpet player.
With a racketeer for a brother. Larry Mack is your brother, isn't he?
So what? So what? Does that make me a crook?
Was Danny Payton mixed up with your brother's pals? Did they have any reason for wanting to bump him off?
Well, if they did, I don't know about it, Mr. Chameleon. I just played the trumpet in his band. That's all. That's all.
Who were Payton's enemies? Who hated him enough to kill him? Well, what are you grinning about?
It'd be easy if you asked me who didn't hate him, Mr. Chameleon.
Hmm?
But there was one special little guy who was following him around. Yeah, and was always predicting that Payton was going to die.
What's his name?
Daffy Gus. He's a character, crazy as a coot.
Dave, tell headquarters to pick up a character named Daffy Gus.
Yes, sir.
Oh, wait a minute. This window opens into a court. Whoever occupies that studio right across the court, they, must have seen or heard something in here.
You want me to find out, Mr. Chameleon?
Please, Dave, bring them over here.
Right away.
Now, to get back to you, Al Mack.
There's nothing to get back to, Mr. Chameleon. I had nothing to do with Danny's death.
You found his body a few minutes after he died.
So what? I had an appointment with Danny here at his studio, but I didn't come in.
You didn't come in? Why not?
Hope will tell you. I met her outside in the hall. She said someone was in here with Danny, so I went out for a cup of coffee. Hope will tell you.
Hope? You mean Hope Maynard, Danny Payton singer?
That's her. She's in the next room. Detective Arnold told her to wait there.
Yes, Miss Maynard, come in, please. And you, Al Mack, you wait outside. Come in, Miss Maynard. I'm Chameleon of Central Police Headquarters.
Mr. Chameleon, this is so awful. Poor Danny dead.
Al Mack, his trumpet player, tells me that he met you in the hall here just before the murder, that you told him not to come in to Danny Payton's studio. Why?
Because some man was in here with Danny. The door was closed, but I could hear them. They were having an awful argument. It was terrifying, Mr. Chameleon. I could hear the man say.
Payton, you deliberately stole my song. You intend to feature it with your band and pretend it's your own.
Really? How interesting.
Payton, you can't take someone's creation, something that came from my head, from my heart. You can't steal a thing like that and say it's your own.
Can't I? Try and stop me.
Then you admit you stole my song.
I admit nothing. And you can't prove it's your song.
No, you're right. I can't. I can't prove a thing. But you're not going to get away with it. I won't let you get away with it.
Now, wait a minute.
So help me, I'll kill you first. I'll kill you before I let you get away with this rotten trick.
That was enough for me, Mr. Chameleon. I beat it fast. I left the building.
In other words, you left Danny Payton to be murdered, Miss Maynard.
I didn't know he was going to be murdered. How could I know?
You overheard someone threaten him, yet you didn't make a move to help him. You let him be beaten till he was barely able to crawl to the telephone.
Then it was the beating that killed him.
Obviously, Miss Maynard. Why didn't you go into a studio?
Because, Mr. Chameleon, if I'd gone in there, Danny would only have thrown me out. Danny was often in trouble. The members of his band learned to keep out of his affairs.
Were you in love with Danny?
In love with Danny? Why, certainly not. What gives you that idea?
Nothing. I simply asked. What did the man look like? The one who was threatening Payton?
I didn't see him. The door was closed.
Would you recognize his voice?
Yes, Mr. Chameleon, I'm sure I would. I know
Mr.
that
Chameleon, can you come here a minute?
Yes, Dave, right away. You wait here, Miss Maynard, please. What is it, Dave?
This is the guy who has that studio across the court. Jimmy Phillips, and this is his girl, Dela Brown.
My fiancée.
Oh, sorry, your fiancée. He didn't want to come with me, Mr. Chameleon.
Why should I? I don't know anything about Danny Payton's murder.
Well, if you don't know anything, Jimmy, why do you look so frightened? And you too, Miss Brown. You're trembling.
No, I'm not.
If you really don't know anything, you have nothing to fear. But since your studio window, Jimmy, faces this room where Payton was murdered...
I wasn't even in my studio at the time he was murdered.
How do you know what time Payton was murdered? Dave, did you tell him?
I certainly did not, Mr. Chameleon.
I heard about it. My gosh, everyone on the block is talking. I heard that...
Mr. Chameleon! Mr. Chameleon!
Yes, Miss Maynard.
That's the man. That's the man I was telling you about. I recognized his voice through the door. That's the man I heard threatening to kill Danny Payton.
All right, Jimmy, there's no use denying it. Your voice has been identified. You're the man who was heard quarreling with Danny Payton, threatening to kill him.
Suppose I keep on denying it, Mr. Chameleon.
Della, are you in love with this boy?
He's my whole life, Mr. Chameleon.
Well, then please make him understand that he must tell the truth. He's only hurting himself this way.
Jimmy, please.
Okay, Della. I'll tell the truth, Mr. Chameleon. I'm the one who was with Danny Payton. I even threatened to kill him, the way Hope Maynard said. But I didn't kill him.
You beat him up?
I knocked him down, yes, but I didn't murder him.
You hit him over the head with a bookend from his desk.
No, Detective Arnold, I didn't. I couldn't have.
What do you mean by you couldn't have, Jimmy?
He means he's not a killer, Mr. Chameleon.
I think he also means that he may not be sure. That he may not quite remember what he did when he was in the grip of a murderous rage.
Mr. Chameleon, I don't have a temper like that. It wasn't a murderous rage.
Jimmy, that man had stolen your property. A very special piece of property. A thing that you created. A song, right?
Yes.
And you thought it was a good song?
Mr. Chameleon, it's a wonderful song. It would have made Jimmy famous. It would have enabled us to get married.
And it involved a lot of work, Della.
Oh, yes, yes. Jimmy and I worked on it together for months. But I don't get your point.
I think you do, Della. You know, it's strange. A man can be robbed of material possessions and take it in his stride. But a product of your brain, a creative idea, the work of a lifetime, you take that away from him, and a man's mind sometimes snaps. Even a perfectly decent chap can go berserk and kill.
Oh, that's ridiculous. My mind doesn't snap that easily.
No, Jimmy? Della? Did you try to stop Jimmy from coming over here and seeing Danny Payton?
Don't answer him, Della.
Della, you must answer me. Did you try to stop Jimmy?
I begged him to go to a lawyer. I reminded him that Danny Payton was a dangerous man.
And, Jimmy loves you, Della?
We love each other. We had such hope.
Of course. And ordinarily, Jimmy would listen to you, Della. But not this time. You see who that is, Dave, please?
Okay, Mr. Chameleon.
Jimmy, if your feelings against Payton were strong enough to blind you to Della's love, to all common sense thinking, then it might have been strong enough to kill.
Mr. Chameleon, I still say that you don't know what you're talking about. A man doesn't go crazy just like that. He can't.
You're wrong, Jimmy.
No, I'm not.
Mr. Chameleon, that was Detective Foley at the door. He's picked up that character known as Daffy Gus.
Oh, good. Bring him in here, please.
Daffy Gus? What do you want with Daffy Gus?
You know him, Jimmy?
Oh, everyone around Tin Pan Alley knows him. He's got a hole in the wall with a battered piano, and he lives on handouts.
There he is, Mr. Chameleon.
Oh, come in, Gus. I'm Chameleon of Central Police Headquarters.
Sure. I heard of you, copper. Hi, everybody. Hey, you're a pretty girl.
Yes, isn't she, Gus? Her name is Dela Brown, and this is Jimmy Phillips, who is suspected of murdering Danny Payton.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's swell. I knew Danny Payton would get it. I know all about it. Yeah, I know all about it. Da, 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 da,
You mean that you know who killed him?
I mean, I know all about it. Ask me no questions, copper, and I'll tell you no lies. Yeah,
What is that tune that you're humming, Gus? It sounds like Danny Payton's famous song hit, Sunset.
Danny's song? It's mine. He stole it from me. I used to be in his band. He made a fortune on Sunset. He said he composed it. And me, I had no copyright. So what could I do? Ah, gee, it was sure funny how he put it over on me. Pretty tune, ain't it?
One of my favorite melodies, Gus.
Hey, you got good taste, copper. I knew Danny would get it. I know all about it.
Dave, take him in the room with Al Mack, the trumpet player. I'll be right in.
Sure, Mr. Chameleon.
Come on, Gus.
Well, Jimmy, now what do you have to say?
Mr. Chameleon,
There is your proof. Your tragic living proof that a man's mind can break completely when he's robbed of his own creation. And I repeat, it can even drive a decent man to murder.
Mr. Chameleon and the Stolen Melody murder case continues in just a moment. One reason why millions use Bayer aspirin to relieve ordinary headaches is that Bayer aspirin means amazingly fast relief. And its astonishing ability to be ready to go to work in 2 seconds is something you can prove right in your own home. To find out how quickly Bayer Aspirin is ready to go to work, all you need do is clock its disintegrating speed. Simply drop the tablet in a glass of water. What happens in the glass happens in your stomach, and as you'll see with your own eyes when you make this test, Bayer Aspirin tablets start disintegrating almost instantly. And this 2-second action is why you get such quick pain relief. So to relieve a headache, neuritic, or neuralgic pain fast, use something you can actually prove works with remarkable speed, genuine Bayer Aspirin. And don't forget, no other pain reliever can match Bayer Aspirin's record of use by millions of normal people without ill effect. And that means Bayer Aspirin offers you dependable relief, too. When you buy, ask for it by name, Bayer Aspirin, not just for aspirin alone. Get the 100-tablet bottle and you get Bayer Aspirin tablets for less than a penny apiece. And now back to Mr. Chameleon and the Stolen Melody murder case. The brutal murder of Danny Payton, the famous band leader, has strange angles and has brought Mr. Chameleon face to face with some of the strange characters of Tin Pan Alley. And none is weirder than Daffy Gus, the pathetic, still young madman whom Mr. Chameleon is now questioning in Danny Payton's studio. And with him is Al Mack, the trumpet player, and Hope Maynard, Payton's vocalist, who is saying to Mr. Chameleon,
Mr. Chameleon, this is all so dreadful. Can't I go home?
In just a moment, Miss Maynard. Tell me, do you know this man?
Daffy Gus? Why, everyone knows Daffy Gus.
And everybody knows you, Hope. Oh, you're a beautiful girl and a swell singer. And everybody knows Al Mack and his hot trumpet. The old trickster.
Cut it out, Gus.
Keep out of this, Al Mack. Whatever Gus has to say, I want to hear it.
Yeah, but suppose I won't talk, Copper. I know all about Danny Payton's murder, but suppose I don't talk.
Gus, where were you at the time that Payton was killed?
Oh, I was around. Yeah, I was around.
You were around where?
Well, I was in New York City, west of Broadway, and I know what I know. I know what I know.
Mr. Chameleon, this guy's kidding you along.
It's all right, Dave. I understand him better than you think. Gus, I hear that you had a habit of following Danny Payton.
You bet I did. I used to make him nervous. Oh, how I loved to make Danny nervous and watch him squirm. I used to sing like this whenever I followed him.
That's the song that you stole from him, isn't it, Gus? Why didn't you beat him up the way Jimmy Phillips did?
Maybe I did. And maybe I was too timid. Now, Al Mack here, he was a smart one. Danny swiped one of his tunes, too, but Al stuck around.
Gus.
Al took it out on Danny. Got him mixed up in rackets. So Danny was up to his neck in trouble.
Shut up, you poor loony, or I'll choke the breath
No,
out of
you won't, Al Mack. Keep away from Gus. Keep away.
Come on, Mac, keep your distance.
Mr. Chameleon, this guy Gus is nuts. He's been saying for weeks that Danny Payton would die. How did he know unless maybe he planned to do it himself?
I'm convinced that Gus knows the truth about Danny's death, Al.
But the man's obviously crazy, Mr. Chameleon.
Even so, Miss Maynard, I think Gus knows the answer. All right, you can all go, but don't try disappearing. Come along, Dave. I want to get back to headquarters.
Mr. Chameleon,
Yes, what is it, Gus?
don't you want to know where I was at the time Danny Payton died?
Well, I don't care particularly, Gus.
I was outside this building, and I saw the kid, Jimmy Phillips. I saw him come running out of Danny's place, all upset.
Thank you very much, Gus. That'll help. I'm sure that you know all the answers. Goodbye.
Mr. Chameleon, do you really believe that poor crackpot Daffy Gus?
I believe that he can put the finger on Payton's murderer, Dave. But Jimmy and Dela are still waiting. Jimmy.
Yes, Mr. Chameleon. What did he say?
Daffy Gus? Plenty. You can go now, both of you, but don't go far.
Mr. Chameleon, you still haven't told us what Daffy Gus said.
Well, I'm sorry to say, Della, that he added his bit to the general testimony against Jimmy. He said that he saw you run out of this place, Jimmy, in a rage.
Mr. Chameleon, I admit I was here. I admit I fought with Danny Payton. But you still don't have the evidence that will convict me because I didn't kill him.
The case is young yet, Jimmy. Before very long, I may have the vital piece of evidence that I need.
Who's going to give it to you, Mr. Chameleon?
No one has any vital evidence.
You're wrong about that, Jimmy. Just as you were wrong when you said before that a man's mind couldn't snap so easily. I'll be seeing you.
Jimmy, Did you hear what Mr. Chameleon said? He's going to get evidence.
You mean from Daffy Gus? Oh, I should have listened to you, Della, when you tried to stop me from going to see Peyton.
Jimmy, you've got to tell me the truth. Did you kill him or not?
I'm wondering if what Mr. Chameleon said is true. Maybe I did pick up that book and...
But did you touch it? If you did, they'll find your fingerprints are on it.
I don't know. I don't know.
Well, we can't change what's past and done, but there's something that can be done. And I'm going to do it. Now.
Meanwhile, Mr. Chameleon and Detective Dave Arnold are picking their way through the crowds on Broadway. And Dave, studying Mr. Chameleon's grave and thoughtful face, says,
Mr. Chameleon, did you mean it when you said that Daffy Gus might have the evidence which would convict Jimmy Phillips?
I didn't say that, did I, Dave?
Well, that was the impression you gave.
That was the impression I intended to give, yes. And I want it played up in the newspapers, too.
But, Mr. Chameleon, Daffy Gus, he was one of Danny Peyton's victims, too. Couldn't he have been mixed up in the killing somehow?
Mm-hmm. You see, all paths lead to Daffy Gus, and that's the way I want it. We must find the place where Gus lives, that hole in the wall with a piano in it. And then I'm going in there in disguise.
What kind of a disguise, Mr. Chameleon?
Ask me no questions, Dave, and I'll tell you no lies. Ta-tam, ha-ta-ra-ta-ta. I know the answer. I know what I know.
Mr. Chameleon, you're going to disguise yourself as Daffy Gus?
Think I can do it, Dave? You're a smart copper. You think I can fool him?
Mr. Chameleon, you keep that up and you'll fool Daffy Gus himself. But even so, it's a tricky and a dangerous thing to do.
Well, I agree, but even so, I need the piece of evidence, that final piece of evidence that will wrap up the case for good.
And so, a few days later, we find Mr. Chameleon in his amazing disguise of Daffy Gus, the half-crazy song composer from Tin Pan Alley. And in the poverty-stricken room which Gus used as a workshop, Mr. Chameleon is softly playing the battered old piano. When Detective Dave Arnold bursts in.
Mr. Chameleon, I just found out... Oh, I thought Mr. Chameleon was here.
He is, Dave. He is.
What? I'll be darned.
It was the dim candlelight that helped my disguise. What's new, Dave?
Plenty, Mr. Chameleon. Had any visitors?
No, not yet.
Well, you will. Right now, Daffy Gus is being fed a steak dinner by Detective Foley, so that'll keep him away from here. But Jimmy Phillips has been watching this building for hours.
Yes, I expected that.
And Al Mac's gangster brother has been driving around the block. Mr. Chameleon, these people are all laying for Daffy Gus. They think the poor nut knows who killed Peyton.
That's what I'm counting on, Dave. That the murderer will come here to get Daffy Gus before he talks. That's why I'm disguised as Gus, to lead them on.
Mr. Chameleon, you're taking a terrible risk.
Well, I'll be ready for it. And you must be, too, Dave. Stand flat in back of the door, just inside. And if you have to, shoot.
Okay. Listen. Someone's coming up the stairs.
Sounds like two people, Dave. Now they've stopped. One is coming up alone. All right, in back of the door, Dave. Here we go.
And Mr. Chameleon resumes his playing on the piano. Until finally he speaks in the voice of Daffy Gus.
Who's there? Who's outside in the hall?
May I come in?
Well, who is it? I can't see you.
I can't see you very well either. Gus, I'm Dela Brown, Jimmy Phillips' girl.
Oh, the pretty one. Sure, I know you now. I had pretty girls once, too.
Gus, is it true you have evidence against Jimmy? I mean, that he killed Danny Peyton.
How could I have evidence if Jimmy's innocent? You didn't think of that, huh?
But he is innocent.
I know what I know. I know what I know.
Oh, stop saying that. If you have evidence against Jimmy, tell me what it is.
I have it. But I won't tell you. I'll tell the coppers. And you'll have to kill me first to stop me. Only someone else might get hurt first. You got her, Dave?
I've got her, Mr. Chameleon, but she's a little wildcat. See if you can get her gun.
Give me that gun. There. Now, Hope Maynard, suppose you tell me why you tried to kill me. Or rather, killed Daffy Gus.
Mr. Chameleon! You're Mr. Chameleon disguised as Daffy Gus.
Yes. Suppose you tell me why you used Della here as a shield, sneaking up the stairs behind her.
Oh, Mr. Chameleon, it was Hope Maynard who persuaded me to come here. She convinced me that Daffy Gus had evidence against Jimmy.
And he did. It was Jimmy Phillips who killed Danny Payton.
Really? Then why should you take a shot at Daffy Gus? Planning, of course, to frame Della with the murder of Gus. No, Hope Maynard, it was you who killed Danny Payton because he gave you the gate.
What are you talking about? I was never in love with him, nor he with me.
What about the wedding license taken out in Connecticut 3 or 4 months ago?
What?
You took one out, and nothing happened. I found it among his papers.
You're completely mistaken.
And we searched your apartment and found the letters from Payton telling you that he was in love with another girl and that he was firing you from his band.
He was going to give that other terrible creature the job.
So you sneaked back into the building after Jimmy left it to murder Danny Payton. And you were afraid Daffy Gus had seen you sneak back.
Even if I did go back, Danny died from the beating. He died from the beating that Jimmy gave him.
No. Danny Payton died from a blow on the head. You struck him that blow with a metal bookend when he picked up the telephone. 10 full minutes after Jimmy Phillips was out of the building.
Danny was no good. He was no good, Mr. Chameleon.
I've gathered as much. But murder is murder. No, Hope Maynard, you and Danny Payton were two of a kind. And there's a sort of justice in that fact, that his death should bring about your downfall, too.
And with these words, Mr. Chameleon concludes tonight's murder case. Mothers everywhere, listen carefully. Now, genuine Bayer aspirin is available in a new children's size tablet containing half the amount of the regular size Bayer aspirin tablet. These new children's size Bayer aspirin tablets make it possible for you to conveniently give your children the proper dosage as prescribed by your doctor. And because they're made so they can be broken right in half, you can easily give still smaller dosages when necessary. In addition, these new children's size Bayer aspirin tablets have another feature that appeals to wise mothers. They are neither flavored nor colored, so they cannot be mistaken for candy. And they can be used with complete confidence. For the fact that doctors prescribe Bayer aspirin's single active ingredient even for the smallest children shows how gentle and dependable it is. The bottle and carton are plainly marked, Children's Size Bayer Aspirin, 30 tablets for 25 cents. Listen next Wednesday night at the same time for Mr. Chameleon, the man of many faces, in The Party Girl Murder Case. The part of Mr. Chameleon is played by Carl Swenson, with dialogue by Marie Baumer, from the original story by Frank and Ann Hummert. Music directed by Victor Arden. Your announcer is Howard Planey.
A remarkable scientific discovery now makes it possible to cut down tooth decay. You simply use new ammoniated Dr. Lyon's tooth powder. Based on a formula developed by University of Illinois scientists, it actually destroys bacteria Lactobacillus acidophilus, which cause tooth decay. Now think of the pain, worry, and expense this can save you, the wonderful difference it can make in the health and beauty of your teeth. So to cut down tooth decay, to have sounder, healthier, handsomer teeth, use ammoniated Dr. Lyon's tooth powder. Both regular Dr. Lyon's tooth powder and new ammoniated Dr. Lyon's are at all drug and toilet goods counters.
Listen for Mr. Chameleon in The Party Girl Murder Case next Wednesday night at this time. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.